Today is all about cladding your staircase. And what that means is covering your original staircase with oak. So our first job before we even start looking at doing any cladding is to get this old carpet up or whatever floor covering you've got on your stairs. So a quick tip for when you're removing your carpet off your stairs is to get yourself a nice sharp knife. We're going to go to the corner, so this is called a winder. We're going to put ourselves a nice straight cut in the carpet. Put that to one side, and then if we just feed our fingers up underneath the cut we made, we can give that a pull. And it's as easy as that. So we're going to do that on the rest, and then we'll show you how we get rid of those grippers. Once the carpet's up, you need to pull the underlay up. So it's either stapled or glued, but if you just give it a pull, this one's been glued. That'll just come straight out your way. So when it comes to the grippers, we're going to use either a little flathead screwdriver, or if you've got an old chisel you don't mind blunting. And then we go to each nail on the piece of gripper, and if we just go next to those and tap under and lift, and then we do each one, we're not trying to rip it up in one piece. We just move along, lift, move along, lift, and you can get that gripper up. So we're going to do that on all the stairs, and we're going to start cleaning them off. So our original floor covering is all been removed. We've gone over the floor and de-nailed, de-pinned, made sure these are nice and clean. And you may notice that a balustrade is missing. That's because we're currently filming a separate video on how to install a glass balustrade. So take no notice of that. First job is to clad our stringers. So what we have is a 6mm piece of clad. It's been veneered in oak. So this is what we're going to be using to cover up our stringers, which are these sections on the side of your staircase. So we've clamped it, sat flat on the tops of our stairs, so as far down as it goes, clamped it to the side of our Newels, and then we need to scribe the shape of our stairs out of it. So to scribe the stringer, the piece of cladding in, we need to get a measurement which is the largest distance. So we're going to come from the top of this tread here to the top of that tread there. So this distance here, from there to there, we want to cut either a block of timber to that size, or if you've got a scribe like this one, we can set that to the distance so that it's at its tallest. So as you can see, we're to the top of that tread, from the top of the bottom tread there, and we lock that in position, and now we can start scribing the tops of the treads in. And then all we do with either your scribe or your block that you've cut to use as a scribe is we just follow the step below, and our pencil marks it out. We're going to do that on every tread all the way down. So we've marked all of our treads, and we can now concentrate on marking our risers, which is the vertical section. We take a combination square, measure from the riser to the front of the ball nose, which you'll have on your stairs, like so, and then transfer that to the top. We then want to set our scribe from the back of that tread to that mark we've just made. And then once we've set that scribe, or you've cut a new block to use as a scribe, we're going to now come up the risers. And you'll notice that we're slightly short. Don't worry about that, we're going to come back to that. So we're just going to go along. Remember, when you're scribing, you want to keep your scribe as horizontal as possible, or as vertical and level and plumb as you can, because that will change the distance. And now that we've scribed all the way down our treads and our risers, we want to come around the back side of our bit of clad and mark up the side of our Newels on the top and the bottom. Right, so we've brought the piece out to our trestles. The first cuts we're going to be making are those ones along the Newels on the back. I'm going to be using a track saw. You can use a skill saw. You can even get away with maybe using a hand saw. Bit difficult, but you can. And then with a track saw, we're just going to come up to that line we made, and we're just going to cut this piece off. And then what we've done, we've come along with a straight edge, scrap, or whatever you want to use, and we've just connected those lines we had all up. So these sections here are all going to get cut off. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run my track saw up to the point. I'm not going to overcut it. I'm just going to stop on that on all of our lines, and then we'll come through at the end with a jigsaw and just finish our cuts. So that's what we're going to be left with on each cut. So we've just got this little corner to take out. So now we get our jigsaw and we just finish off the little corners we can get to with our track saw. And just remember, we don't want to overcut in these corners. So let's get the rest of these cut out. Right, now that that's all cut out, before we bring it in and test fit it, we've got a little piece of scrap. And remember about these ball noses I was saying, don't worry about that until after. Well, now's our time. We're going to take this and our multi-tool, and we're going to use the off-cut of our veneer or our clad, and we're just going to guide our multi-tool into that nose. And we're only going as far as the riser. So as you can see, we've just removed a little section of the nose, so when we bring in our square edge, it'll be able to lock straight down and over that tread, rather than trying to scribe these out. And once we've finished our cutting, we can trial fit it. And we're all good. If you don't go in first time, just give it a little trim up, see where it's tight, and you'll get it in. And we've got one last cut to make, so let's get that marked. So from this side, you can see we're just still too tall. Now you could measure this, but the easiest thing to do is get yourself a pencil and just mark that back edge all the way up, and then we'll run our track saw over and fit it for the last time. Right, so we've done exactly the same process on our opposite side. The only difference is, when we get down to this bottom step here, before the winders, I've just put a 90 degree from that top edge, cut back, right against where this riser finishes. So now that we've got the two long stringers in, we can move on to the slightly more complicated section. So where we come across down here. For us, we've got these curved stringers because this staircase is very old. So we're going to be squaring these up because we want to put a trim on top and put miters in it. So what we've done, we've got ourselves some 6mm MDF strips, and it's going to be a case of sitting them where you want them, getting a pencil, so we're just marking against here, and then we just take it to a chop saw and mark it. You ain't got to panic about this. If you make a mistake, we're just going to keep cutting it. And we've got loads of little pieces until we get the shape of this section of stringer. And what we're aiming for is basically an outside shape of this area. So we're going to be putting a separate piece every time our angle changes, because we want this grain to turn as the stairs turn. So if you look here, if you ignore that curve, it's a straight line from there to there, but then the angle changes and goes to there. So we're going to stop it right where that riser is. So you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And it doesn't matter how you get to that point, that's what I'm trying to make clear. As long as you've got a lovely template on the outside. And now that we've got our pieces, and we come to the front of that nose there, we're going to connect up nicely to our previous bit. We're just going to take ourselves a little hot melt gun, like this one. And then we're just going to hot melt these pieces together. And now we can transfer this outside line. Now we've got our little piece of cladding, we can take our template and put it on top. The reason we do this is because this, if we mess it up, is a lot cheaper and easier to quickly do another one. If we mess up the cladding, obviously it's going to cost you money and it's going to cost you time. So if you imagine that was our little piece we needed, that riser, the top of that riser edge, we want to line that up with the flat side of our cladding. And the reason we do that is so that the grain of the wood follows the stringer rather than being flat with the tread, because it will look very odd if it comes like that. So we're going to set this on, use a very sharp pencil and go around and get it cut. So now we've marked it all out, I'm going to use my track saw again and we're going to cut along those lines exactly. Right, that's what we're left with. So let's go and see if it fits. Right, so we're just going to check our piece that we cut. Remembering this is all just dry fit for now, so we're just pushing it into position. So we're happy with that. And now we can do the same process. So we're going to take some of our 6mm MDF strips, we'll glue them all together the same as we did the last one, and then we'll check it, make sure it fits. So there's our next little template all glued together. So we'll just give it a little test. It's got to go in there, nice and tight. So we'll take that to another piece of cladding and we'll cut this one out. So using that template method, we've got all of our little pieces cut. So our first job is to remove what we've already put in place loosely. So what we're going to be sticking them on with is some CT1 in oak, and we're just going to apply it to the stringer for the section that we're gluing, and then we'll slide it into place and stick it. I'm just pushing it all into place, and CT1 has got really good grab properties, so it's like grabbing it really quickly, so we ain't got to worry about it all moving around. Right, now for our little templated pieces, which are these. It's the same process. We're going to glue up our stringer where they're going. Only difference is we're going to use some wood glue, so we've got Type Bond 3 or whatever wood glue you like to use on the parts that join together. So I'll apply the adhesive first, and then I'm going to put my Type Bond straight onto the joint here. And now that we've pushed it into position and it's stuck on, if any excess glue, we just want to rub that into that joint. And as you can see, we've got this little hairline gap there. So we're going to take some 120 and we're just going to sand over that. And what that's done, that's taken a little layer of oak off the top and it's stuck it into any joints that you might have. So when we varnish or oil this, it's going to look perfect. Now that our stringers are done, it's time to move on to our risers and our treads. And they come in a box like this. All the stuff that's been supplied on this job, including the cladding for the stringers, the Newels, everything has been supplied by Stairbox. So I want to give a massive shout out to Mike and Andy and the team over at Stairbox. So if you like any of this sort of material or you want to do a job for yourself, go and check out their website. It's brilliant. So what do we get? We've got a tread in oak. We've got a riser. That's pine, but it's cladded in oak on the front, which we'll show you. And we've also got these packing strips to bring the riser forward, and you're going to see exactly how they work in a minute. So the first thing we want is these packing strips. So let's go to the staircase. So these strips of timber or wood that are supplied in the packs are designed to go on the front of the risers and bring our new riser over the nose. And that's an easy job. All we're going to do is measure across the width of our riser. And now that we've got our measurement, we can take these to the saw and chop them down to the correct length. Right, so that's the packers cut to length. As you can see, they fit in the space here. And to install them, we're going to use CT1 on the back of them. And then we stick one about 10mm above the tread below. And then in the pre-drilled holes, as you can see, we're just going to put some 30 or 40mm screws through to hold it in place until that dries. And for the top one, it's the same process, except we're going to come down about 30mm from the bottom of that nose. And we're going to do that exact same process for every single tread, including any winders or quarter landings or subs that you may have. Right, now that we've fitted all of our spacers to the front of our old risers, it's time to install our new risers. So we're going to start measuring for those. The way we measure for our risers is using a jig. So this is a stair jig and it adjusts in and out, and it also adjusts for the pitch like this. So we put it in place of our riser and then we just extend it out, and then we start tightening up these little knobs, and that locks into position. That's going to give us the perfect outline for our riser. So when you are removing these jigs, just be very careful not to knock them, because obviously you don't want to change how it's been set. And one last thing to know, we want to keep the orientation that you took the template. So my writing is always facing up when I transfer it back over. So the top is the top and the bottom is the bottom. You want to take a very sharp pencil, and then we're just going to trace these two edges. The reason we like to use the jig and not just measure it is because a lot of times stringers are not square. So as you can see, if we had just made a square cut, we would have been very, very short on the top. So I do advise getting yourself a little jig. And now it's time to get it cut. So before we line up to make our cut, I like to put a little bevel. So we're going to tip our saw over 5 degrees. So we're back cutting the front, and that's just going to help for a tight fit. And then we spend a bit of time just lining our saw up with our mark. So we just check with the teeth, and then we can make our first cut. So it's the same process for the other side, but we've got to remember to swap that bevel over to the opposite side. So basically we're trying to undercut like that on our cuts. And once we've cut it to size, we can just double check that it fits. And it's going to be a nice tight fit, and that's what you're after. So we're not going to force it into position. We then want to grab some adhesive, and we're just going to be going along those battens, putting little blobs. Once we've got our adhesive on, we take our riser, we're just going to slide that into place. One last thing to know, if your risers come over the tread, you'll need to cut down the height, so you take it off this bottom edge until this top lip here is flush with your original stair or landing. So we're now going to start to use our jig and measure each individual riser and install every single one before moving on to our nosings. Right, now that all of our risers have been installed using the method I've just taught you. So in our kit we get a nosing that looks like this. So our first job is to cut down the width of our tread, and the way we do that is to measure from the riser to the front of this lip on top, and we're going to add 5mm so that we can scribe it in after. So to translate that onto the actual tread, we're going to measure from this lip on the underside, and we'll just put our little mark, so ours is 200. So we're going to take this and cut down the width right now. Now that we've got our width cut down, we can take our jig back to the staircase. Right, so we're using our jig again. The only difference is we're now packing it up off of the original stair by the thickness of the new tread. So we've got 12mm because that's the thickness, and then we're going to measure using our jig from those packers. And the reason we do that is if our stringers are not square, which these definitely are not, this is going to give us an accurate cut for the top, the visual section, the bit you're going to see. And then we're going to transfer our jig over onto our tread that we've already cut the width down on. So unlike the risers, we're not going to be back cutting this, because if we did, you'd see it on the nose of our treads. We're just going to line it up and cut it straight off. And then we give it a little test fit. Now this one's got a slight obstacle, so we can just mark that out now. The depth of this, we're just going to cut out of the corner of this Newel. So we've got it sat loosely in place. Our last job, if you remember, we cut this 5mm too wide, is to scribe this gap that's underneath, and we've got to cut that amount off this back edge. So we'll have a little test fit of our piece, and it's going to be tight, which is what we want. So before we wedge it in, it's time to apply some glue. So I'm just going to apply glue to the top of the existing tread, and then one last step before we get this into position is to apply some wood glue to this tongue that we've got on top, and I also like to apply it down this back edge to try and attach the existing and the new together. And now that we've got our glue in place, we can get this new tread in. Right, now that we've got that on, we're going to continue exactly the same process all the way down these straights, and then we'll explain the process of installing winders and quarter landings. So unlike the straights, on the winders we're going to be using our templating method again. So we're going to get some strips of 6mm MDF, and then we're going to start cutting these to the shape of our winder coming to the front of this little nose section. So you should be left with something that looks a little like this with your little pieces, and then just as we did with our cladding on the stringers, we're going to glue these together using our little glue gun. If you are looking for any of the tools that we're using in this video, just remember in the description below, you can find them all there. One last step before we take this template away is we are going to be writing on this one. We're going to write top to show us that this is the top, because we are actually going to be cutting this slightly differently. Right, so what we've got is a nose upside down, and then we've got one of our extensions that you can order from Stair box, and we then slide that into the tongue, and then that template that you writ top on, we now want to put that top facing down, and then we slide up to that lip on the nose, and that is going to be our new measurement. And now it's just a simple case of tracing around the edge and using our track saw to cut the pattern out. Right, now that our piece has been cut, we're going to apply our glue, and then we apply our wood glue, and then we're going to stick our first small little piece in. Doesn't matter if it's exact. And then we're going to apply glue to that tongue. And now we're going to slide our front section into position. Right, so we just run our sander over the joint to try and get it as nice and flat as we possibly can. And that is our winder done. So we're going to do the exact same process on the rest. If you have a little look here, not the best cut, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be doing some cladding around here. So that will be completely covered. Right, so now that our stairs are cladded and when it's all finished, it's time to do the little touches. So this is a J-Tim, you get it from Stair box. And these get installed on top of our stringers, like that. And you might be thinking, well, how am I going to find all these angles? Easily peasily with an angle finder. That's what we like to use, and that's what we suggest you use. So all you do is you bring these down to your two sides like that, and then this gives us our exact cut that we need to do on our miter saw. Right, once we've got a few of our pieces, so we've got these little pieces here, we're going to be using Super Fast from C-Tech. We then apply the glue to one side, and then we activate the other side, and we stick the pieces together, and we glue our next section. So what we do is we pre-assemble as many of the miters as we can off, because you're going to get a much nicer miter and a much nicer finish. We can then give it a little light sand if you want to, or if you need to, just to take any high spots off. And then we're just going to use our grab adhesive on the top section of stringer, and then it's just a case of sliding your piece into position. And then we're just going to press the trim into that grab adhesive. So before we wrap this up, don't forget those 15mm holes we made. We've got some 15mm oak dowel. We're going to apply glue to the end, and then we start it off in our hole, remembering to try and line our grain up as best we can. And then we take ourselves a little mallet, and then we just tap that in. Right, now we're going to leave that for about 20 minutes, half hour. Right, so the glue has now cured, so now we can take our hand saw, and then we're going to chop that end off. And then that last little bit, we're going to sand back. You can use sandpaper with your hands, or grab a DA like this one, and then we just run it over until it's smooth. Right, all done, and our final job is to clad that bottom newel post. So with the cladding, you get a little kit from Stair box, exactly like this one. We can't give you exact process because they're all different depending on your staircase, but we can give you some tips. So use some hardboard or even some cardboard to make a little template before you start cutting your cladding kit for your newel. And like the rest of the cladding, we use our grab adhesive on the newel to stick it to it, and then we use wood glue in these pre-formed miters to stick the kit together. And another little top tip, once you've got your shape and it's all ready to go, if you grab some masking tape, it helps with your miters. You can pull them together just while the wood glue sets off, and it'll give you less work to do on those miters.
Right, I hope this video has been a massive help to you guys. A big shout out to Stair box, and just remember to like, subscribe and leave a comment if it's helped you guys at home.